I have a wonderful episode of the Fancy Scientist podcast today for you, especially if you are interested in wildlife careers. I had the opportunity to talk to a wildlife biologist at the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, Jamie Bowles. She's been working there for 9 years across various jobs. She has so much experience and tons of great advice. Throughout the podcast, she calls herself lucky. I don't think she's lucky at all. She did the right things to set herself up so that when opportunities were available, they were given to her. Not only is this guest an experienced wildlife biologist who's worked on everything from fish to habitat to wolves to now porcupines to working with the public, but she also did this while being a mom of 4. As you'll find out from her interview, she had children when she was 18 and went to college after she became a mom. She was always going to school and working towards getting this career. And she has some amazing wisdom on how she did it. You'll learn that she put herself out there, that she was networking, and she made opportunities happen for her. You're going to love this conversation with wildlife biologist Jamie Bowles. Hi, Jamie. Welcome to the Fancy Scientist podcast. I am so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm really excited to be here today, too, and I definitely feel like a fancy scientist.
I was going to ask you if you were a fancy scientist. Tell us about that. Are you actually a fancy scientist? Did you always feel like one?
Yeah, I guess kind of in a way, maybe the fancy biologist. It's funny you say that. I was actually in a meeting last week for one of the groups that I'm in. And in one of the plans that we're working on editing right now, someone had used the term scientist instead of biologist. And we've been referring to ourselves as biologists for almost the entire document. And someone else had made a comment on it, like, well, I don't ever refer to myself as a scientist. And then they had a whole conversation about how the other guy's kid was like, well, of course you're a scientist. And so in the end, we ended up just leaving it there. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I'm just a fancy scientist.
Okay, but you didn't have problems with the fancy part. You had problems with the scientist part.
I didn't have any problems with any of it. It was just funny that they even brought it up because realistically, here in the wildlife field, we always just call ourselves biologists.
I want to do a whole podcast episode about this, but it started because I worked with teachers and we were part of this program with other scientists. So I think that's why they called me fancy scientist. To be honest, I'm not even that fancy by standards out there. I'm very low key, even though I like fancy things. I can absolutely go to the field, obviously, and stuff. But yeah, for a biologist, I dress up way more than your average biologist does.
I can definitely relate to that one for sure. I've talked to a lot of folks on the phone and eventually they'll meet me in person. And I don't think I'm usually what they're expecting. I mean, I work in such a male dominated field. And a huge part of the reason why I'm a biologist is because I love to hunt. I grew up in the outdoors and I also like to, curl my hair every once in a while. So it's totally okay to be a fancy scientist.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us about your job, where you are now, and how you got to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been a crazy path to get to where I am. So currently I'm acting as the district wildlife biologist for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife for the Ochoco District Office. And that's located in Prineville, Oregon. So right smack dab in the middle of Oregon. I grew up in Central Oregon. I have family that still lives here in Prineville. So I've been in Oregon almost my whole entire life. And my job as the district wildlife biologist is I run this district. So I have a staff. Normally I would have 4, but we cut one of the positions. So I have an assistant district biologist. And I'm lucky because I actually have 2 assistant biologists. So I have 2 assistants. And then I share another biologist with the NRCS. And then this summer, we will also have an intern. So a wildlife intern. And I'm very excited about it. It's one of my favorite things to do is to mentor folks and to get that experience for others. So I'm really looking forward to that. But before this position, which I've been in for almost a year, it will have been a year on May 1st. Prior to that, I've held 8 different positions with the agency in the last 10 years, not including my internship. Yeah.
How was that for you, having all those different positions? I mean, in this field, we know we're expected to take some temporary positions, but did you expect to have that many? Was it a challenge to line them all up? Actually, this month in my Facebook group, I have people vote on topics, and they voted on, and this was proposed by somebody. I didn't come up with this topic, part-time slash seasonal work, and I'd never talked about that before. So I'd love to know your perspective.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I guess that kind of brings something up too, that sometimes it's not seasonal positions or temporary positions. Mine have been mostly job rotations. Other folks would call them details. So like the
Oh,
federal
okay.
government would call them details, but with the state, we call them job rotations. And they're opportunities to learn skills while trying out different positions. I can just kind of give you a background of my circuitous route
Yeah.
across the agency. In 2014, I started as a fisheries intern, and that position was actually through the Oregon State University Cascades, but was funded through ODFW, and was working on an invasive fish removal project up in the high Cascades. And that was a limited position. It was just a summer internship. But in 2015, I was hired as a temp to work up front while a gal took maternity leave. And so the Bend office had an opening as a front office specialist. And they offered me the opportunity to take that job on a temporary basis. And I jumped at it. I was like, I would love to. I was still an undergrad at the time, so it just kind of worked out to be able to work that position for a little bit while I finished up the last of my classes.
Hmm.
That gal decided not to come back. And so I applied for and interviewed for and did get that position permanently. And then in 2017, we kind of had a domino effect happen. One gal left the agency, and it just started this opening of different positions here locally in the Central Oregon region. And so I was able to take a position as a wildlife technician in 2017. And at the same time, I applied to go back to grad school. In 2018, I finished grad school. So I completed my master's of natural resources and a graduate certificate in wildlife management from 2017 to 2018. And then worked in that wildlife technician position for about 2 years, and then was offered an opportunity to take a rotation as an assistant wildlife biologist up in Baker City,
Hmm.
which I was really excited about. It was kind of weird. It was 2020, so COVID.
Hmm.
And took my camp trailer and up and moved and left my husband and our 4 kids here in Central Oregon and moved over to far eastern, northeastern Oregon. I was in that rotation for a little bit, and then a position opened here at this Prineville office as an assistant. And so I applied for it and came back home. My husband was pretty happy about that to have his wife back. And then another job opened up as the assistant wolf biologist, which was also based out of the Prineville office. So I applied for that job and got that position and was in that position for about a year and a half. There was a lot of travel associated with that position. I spent most of my time living out of my work truck. Again, husband, 4 kids at home. You know, he was juggling his job and the kids in school and all that. And then another position came open with the Bend office as a district habitat biologist. It was definitely with a heavy heart that I ended up applying for that job, knowing very well that I needed to be home for my family and not spending so much time in the field. And so I was in that position for actually a really short period of time. And then the regional habitat position opened up. So a much larger district. It covered the entire Deschutes watershed, so 10 counties in the central and northern region of Oregon. I was in that position until last May, and then was offered the opportunity to rotate into this supervisory position here in Prineville.
Wow.
So definitely just varied experience. I have loved each and every single position that I have held with this agency and have learned just a variety of different skills and have worked with so many amazing people along the way.
So these positions, they're meant to be shorter term, like a year, would you say? And you are constantly employed, but they rotate you to different spaces?
So you have like your base position at the beginning when I was working as the front office specialist, but was
Mhm.
offered a rotation as the wildlife technician. you stay in your position as that original position and you can fall back on that. And usually these job rotations are anywhere from like 3 months to a year or longer. When your rotation ends, either that job that you were rotating into opens up for employment or you go back to your old position. So you're filling in some sort of coverage, like someone else is on a job rotation, maybe someone's on parental leave or something like that. They're just kind of opportunistic opportunities to be in actual long-term positions. So like this position that I'm in right now, it's normally occupied by someone else, but he's on a job rotation. So it's just like kind of an ongoing thing, but I would fall back onto my regional habitat biologist role if I were no longer in this rotation.
And they do that so their employees get a lot of experience, it sounds like.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's so tricky about applying for some government agencies. Number one, it's really competitive. I know you've talked about that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And two, for government positions specifically, if you haven't actually worked in a position to gain that experience, it didn't really count. And so when you're working in a position like mine, like right now, the supervisor experience that I'm gaining being in this job rotation will count on paper to human resources in the future, that I have that actual hands-on experience.
Cool. And can you tell us about what you do now as a wildlife biologist? I know there's no typical day, but like, what do some day-to-days look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Most days I don't accomplish all the things that I have set out to do. On a typical day-to-day, I'm working on grant proposals. Like right now, I'm working on writing a project statement for our Porcupine project and going through like the Section 7, which is going through all the endangered species and whether or not we'll have any impacts. The phone rings incessantly. So we don't have a front office staff at this office. And my staff is mostly the ones answering the phone, but I'm taking calls and answering questions about putting in for hunts. So hunt applications, the deadline's coming up, lots of questions about that and where to hunt, where are the turkeys. We just wrapped up sage grouse surveys. So getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning because I live an hour away from the office to drive out to the Lex to do bird counts during the mornings. We're just finishing those up. And we're about to segue into pinion jay surveys. So doing some meandering surveys out in the desert. That should be interesting. We're setting tag numbers right now. So we're working on our allocations for what we're going to offer up for big game hunting for the 2026 season and going through population numbers. We finished up our winter flights, which we did in March. So we do population surveys from the helicopter for deer and elk. And we do that in the late fall and in the winter. So we can get like kind of post-hunting season and pre-hunting season population survey data. Putting out wolf cameras, just keeping track of our local wolf population. We get a lot of calls about sick and injured wildlife. Sometimes we have to go out and euthanize animals if they are pretty severely injured. Other times we get a lot of raptors hung up and stuff. I mean, as you know, wildlife tend to get themselves into some sticky situations. So getting them to a rehab if we can and doing what we can to fix them up ourselves if that's an option. So yeah, our day-to-day, it changes by the minute. I have a plan for this afternoon and I'll be amazed if I get one thing done that I had planned.
Wow, that's a lot of variety. You talked about how this field is competitive. Was it difficult to get your first job?
I would say no, surprisingly. And I know that you've talked about this. Some of it's luck, and the other part is networking. There were only 2 internships offered in the Central Oregon region when it was time for me to take an internship. One of them was working with kids in an after-school program, unpaid, and the other one was the one that I did end up getting, which was working with ODFW on that invasive fish removal project. I didn't really want to work with kids for free. I'm a parent, so I don't get paid to do that anyway, but was really excited about applying for that fisheries job. And I tell the younger students and young professionals all the time, networking is super important. Don't make yourself forgettable. Be an unforgettable person. Work hard, be willing to go out of your way to go out and do the dirty work, if you will, and just show that enthusiasm. So I think it was kind of a bit of both, working really hard and also being in the right place at the right time. That said, it definitely still is very competitive to try and get into the wildlife world.
What kind of networking were you doing? Like, what did it look like?
Coming into the local office and seeing if there were any volunteer opportunities. So Fisheries, I would say, almost always has work that they need help with. And that over here is sticking fish in bags into backpacks and then backpacking them up into the high lakes, which, I mean, gosh, twist my arm, would you? You know, going out and doing stuff like that, volunteering to go out on other types of surveys, just coming in and asking, are there any opportunities to go out and count deer or help on any other sort of trail camera project or anything like that?
So you would just physically show up to the office and you didn't know people and you just asked for volunteer opportunities.
I knew them from my internship, most of the folks that were working in the office at the time. The internship was definitely a foot in the door for me of being able to make all sorts of different connections, and not just with the local office here, but across the state, because there's lots of opportunities across Oregon to work on different projects. But yeah, just popping in and, sometimes I bring some cookies in.
Do you think that would have worked for somebody who didn't know the people? Like if, somebody out there never had any association, they just showed up and asked for volunteer opportunities. Do you think that would have still worked for networking?
Absolutely. Yeah. We get a lot of volunteers that come in to the office or call the office. And we almost always have something that we can put them down for on the schedule or refer them to someone else or another office that may be looking for help. So, yeah, I absolutely do think so. The biggest part of that is following through on it. Like, it's one thing to go in and ask about opportunities, it's another to be given the opportunity and then making sure that you're following through on it and showing up and just being a part of the community, because that can lead to the next thing. You really don't know what's going to happen or who you might talk to that might open a door that you didn't know even existed.
And when you say following through, do you mean actually just showing up? I've heard from people they try reaching out and the person's like, yeah, you can work with me, but then they never provide the next step. So like follow up and things like that. Is that what you're talking about, or just showing up?
I would say both. Number one, follow up for sure. And I can only really speak for my agency. I think a lot of folks reach out just through our website. And then sometimes it makes its way to the correct biologist, and other times, who knows where it ends up going. But definitely just follow up with your local biologist. That's a huge part of it. And then the other thing, yeah, would be, show up. Don't just ask for an opportunity and then someone says, hey, yeah, do you want to go backpack fish somewhere? And then you don't make time for it. I mean, if you truly want to try and get your foot in the door, you might have to move your schedule around. We've had folks that have volunteered and they make the time to fit it in, even though sometimes it's super last minute. But we also wouldn't hold it against you. I mean, we know that life is busy and things definitely happen. But just being persistent, I think, is really important in knowing that you're serious and you really want to see what it would be like to work for the agency.
Hey there. Before we carry on with this interview, I want to interrupt to tell you about something super important. By now, you've learned that networking is critical, and I've learned that LinkedIn is the best place to do it. In fact, Jamie reached out to me because of LinkedIn. I've been taking some courses on LinkedIn, and I want to share what I've learned with you so that you can maximize your networking potential to get the outcomes that you want for your wildlife career. I am super excited to offer the LinkedIn for Wildlife Careers Masterclass. I am running this live Thursday, July 24th at 4 p.m. Central Time. And I have a special promo where you can get in on this masterclass for just $27. Plus, you will get Networking for Introverts, another masterclass that I did. You'll get it for free as a bonus. When you sign up for LinkedIn for Wildlife Careers, you can get started networking right away using Networking for Introverts. What we're going to be doing in this masterclass, it's not just going to be me talking about information. We are going to be working on LinkedIn in real time. I'm going to teach you techniques so that jobs come to you. I talk to so many people who tell me they have such a hard time finding jobs, but every day when I log into my LinkedIn, I see tons of jobs. So I'm going to teach you how to set up your algorithm that way. I'm going to talk to you about making a professional profile, what kind of posts that you want to put out there so that employers see you as the candidate that they want to employ. And most importantly, I'm going to teach you how to effectively network. network intentionally with people who can get you jobs, experiences, internships, whatever it is that you need to succeed. So we're not just going to be talking about this stuff. We're going to be doing it. By the end of this masterclass, you are going to have reached out to somebody you don't know, send a cold message. You are going to start working on your profile, your headline, and you are going to create posts. You're also going to learn why LinkedIn is the best place to connect with wildlife professionals and to get what you want out of your wildlife career, whether that is a job, an experience, to build up your network, whatever you need to up-level your career to the next stage. We're going to do it with this masterclass. So what you're going to do is go to the show notes, or if you're on YouTube, click the link in the description and sign up. I loved LinkedIn and I have been using it for probably a decade now, but I never knew how to use it properly. I always thought it was like for businesses, but now I have cracked the code. I took what I learned from using LinkedIn for entrepreneurs and I have applied it to wildlife careers. My students have had amazing results. One of my students got an interview for an internship that she never even applied to. She started to cold network with somebody and they were so impressed with her. And this person has no experience in the wildlife field at all, not even one single experience. They were impressed by her and they put her in the stack of yeses for the internship to be interviewed. And she got an interview out of that. I've had students get peer-reviewed publications using LinkedIn and the network techniques that I teach and more. Networking leads to jobs. It leads to opportunities. It leads to experiences. You have to build your network. So let's do it together. I will lead you. I will guide you step by step. I will hold your hand through the process. And I promise that LinkedIn is an amazing tool that is totally underused in wildlife careers. And I'm going to show you how to do it.
I want to go back to your fish comment. I mean, I'm thinking about the fish in the backpack, which is funny, but important work, but it's just, I don't know, it sounds funny. But my perception is that fisheries is less competitive and yeah, they need volunteers. It sounds like you don't really work with fish anymore. So if somebody out there is wanting to get into this field, going the fisheries route is a great way to get their foot in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I started as a fisheries intern, and that was 100% fish work was what we were doing. But the way that the offices are set up, especially for the state offices, is you have fish and wildlife staff working together in the office. And so usually when we have volunteers or interns or new employees come in, we're introducing them to everybody in the office, because chances are at some point in time, if you're eventually working at the office and you're a set of free hands and a wildlife biologist needs you on a whim to go respond to an emergency, you're going to be exposed to that work at some point in time. And it happened to me. I was working as a front office specialist at the time, and one of our wildlife biologists needed help and there was nobody else around. And so he grabbed me to go help assist on a deer that was running around in the Old Mill District of Bend with an arrow in its jaw.
Oh my gosh.
And didn't even care what kind of experience or history that I had. He just needed someone that could help.
Yeah.
That happens quite often across the offices, and we do cross train. I mean, I will go out and help our fish biologists do shocking surveys on the river, even though I'm a wildlife biologist. But it's nice to kind of get a change of scenery and go out and do something that's outside your realm every once in a while. I would say any of those positions, be flexible, be willing. It can go a long way.
Tell us about your decision to get your master's. It sounds like you were working at that point. Why did you decide to get your master's? And did you collect research for your master's? And did you do it while you were working?
Great question. Again, the field is really competitive. I was a non-traditional student. I actually had kids super young. I was 18 when I had my oldest. And so I didn't go back to college, or even I should say go to college, until I was in my mid-20s. I actually had worked in the medical field, and during the downturn of the economy in 2008, they cut my entire department and gave us a great severance. And I decided I'm going to go back to school. I was pregnant at the time. So after I had my son, I applied for and went back to school. I actually originally thought I was going to be an English teacher. I really wanted to be a high school English teacher and teach creative writing. as most people understand, you start taking classes and the sciences really started to pull me in that direction. So I started in kind of a different route to get into fish and wildlife. Even though I was a fisheries intern, my foot in the door really was that front office position. And a lot of these positions require either a master's degree or quite a few years of tangible hands-on experience working with wildlife, collecting data, analyzing data. I was kind of behind in the grand scheme of things of all the younger folks that were coming in from undergrad into some of those entry-level positions. I didn't have that. My undergraduate degree is in natural resources management, so that's relevant. But for some of those entry-level positions, you need that education plus some wildlife experience, and I just didn't have that. So I decided that if I wanted to move up in the agency, it was pretty realistic that I was going to need a master's degree in addition to experience to do what I do today to kind of make up for that. So I was, again, very lucky because when I took that position, working as the wildlife technician in 2017, the gentleman that left that position was working on the Sierra Nevada Red Fox project. He had just started it. They were going to be capturing and radio marking with GPS collars Sierra Nevada red foxes up in the high Cascades. And so I got to take on that project. And I was lucky enough that my supervisor was okay with me using those data as my graduate project. Even though I had to pay for school, I paid for all of my grad school, I had the flexibility that I was the one collecting the data that was then going to analyze the data. And then that was my master's project. And it's almost become an example in moving forward for this agency on how to support staff if they are wanting to pursue those higher degrees to advance their career. Oregon, honestly, is kind of behind the times compared to some other states that do pay for their employees to go back to school or to get degrees and certificates necessary in order to retain their employment with the agency. And we're just not really to that point yet. It's something that I would love to see our agency go into that direction rather than trying to accommodate for folks coming from outside the field, but really bolster and support those employees that are willing to go the extra mile.
For people out there who don't have a master's degree, do you think that it's still possible to have a career without a master's in a state agency?
100%. Yeah, I absolutely do think so. One of my staff, she has an undergraduate degree. She doesn't have a master's degree, but she's a hard worker. She's got that undergraduate degree, just gives you such a great base for what it is that, you know, the skills that you need and the basic knowledge that you need in order to then learn everything else on the job. Realistically, we're learning more on the job than you would ever learn at school. A lot of this can't really be recreated. We were just talking about this, that there should be a whole class on answering phone calls from the general public or learning how to read regulations and rules and statutes. That's not something that you're going to necessarily learn while you're pursuing a master's degree. It's going to be hands-on experience. So I wouldn't say that it is required whatsoever to get a master's degree, unless, of course, the company or the nonprofit or the organization that you are applying for requires that to be a master's degree.
Experience is so important. That's why employers care about experience, because so much of this stuff can't be taught in school.
Right. Absolutely.
You mentioned that you have a porcupine project. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we proposed probably, I guess it was about 5 months ago, a project to research the North American porcupine here in Central Oregon. So for a couple of years, I've been pushing that, you know, we're seeing less porcupines in the state than we have in a long time. Just talking to other folks out there, same thing, like, gosh, yeah, I haven't seen a porcupine in a long time. You see a lot of them dead on the road, but not necessarily seeing any porcupines that are alive. And so we proposed a project. We just found out a couple weeks ago that we did receive that funding to start in July. And so for the next 2 years, we'll be training up some volunteers to go out and help us set trail cameras and look for porcupine scat. We're going to be using citizen science for a lot of it. And then we will start capturing porcupines, which our plan is they don't move very fast. So to probably capture them with, like a Rubbermaid trash can. And then you just get your hands on them, and then we'll anesthetize them. And we're going to put GPS collars on them and take a look at their habitat use, their home range size, their den site characteristics. It just anecdotally appears that porcupines use different habitat here in Central Oregon as compared to other areas where they may be utilizing more hardwoods. We see them out in the sagebrush steppe, out in the juniper forested areas. And so just taking a look at the comparison to that. In 2026, they will be added to our statewide action plans, species of greatest conservation needs. There's definitely a need for data. And I mean, who doesn't want to go out looking for porcupines?
Yeah.
And I'd be happy to provide you with this, but it is on my LinkedIn that we do have a QR code where people can report their porcupine observations, hopefully alive porcupines, but we'll also accept any roadkill sightings as well.
I'll definitely put that in the show notes. I saw a porcupine once in North America. I've seen them in Africa too, but in North America. And I was so caught off guard. I saw this animal and I didn't know what it was until we sped up the car to look at it. And I was like, oh my God, like I forgot they lived here because I've never seen one before. It was so cool. You're right. They don't move very fast. It kind of just waddled away.
Yeah, and they make just the most interesting sounds. They're fascinating creatures.
I'll have to look up porcupine sounds. You talked about being an assistant wolf biologist. I'm sure people would love to hear about that job. I know a lot of people who join my Facebook group want to work on wolves. Can you tell us what that was like? And maybe if you have some advice for people wanting to work with wolves?
Yeah, it was a great position. So we have just a handful of wolf biologists here in our state. Our wolf program has a wolf lead, so wolf program coordinator, and she's up in La Grande. And then normally there's a person that's acting as an assistant up in that area. And then we have another one up in the Northeast. And then I was the Central region that's based out of this office. And then we have another one down in the Southwest. A lot of what those positions are is number one, locating wolves, putting out trail cameras, following up on reports, most of those which are coming from the public that are out hiking or recreating in the woods, producers or livestock owners that either on private land or out on grazing allotments that are reporting wolf sign, working with producers on deploying non-lethal deterrents. So, putting out flaggery, teaching them how to put out flaggery and maintain it, going out and hazing wolves with the drones, going out and just being like a human presence. Us as the district bios, we take lead on doing the depredation investigations. So that's going out when a producer has called and there's been livestock that has been either injured or killed potentially by a wolf. We take lead on the district, but the wolf biologists are the ones that are going out and helping with any deterrents that need to happen and coordinating with wildlife services on like, what can we do to help? Can we haul off carcasses? Can we get you any other materials, box lights, stuff like that? And then this time of year, kind of starting to put traps out. So we do foothold trap wolves to put GPS collars on them. So going out and setting traps and checking those traps once or twice a day. My advice, if you wanted to work with wolves, is just keep an eye out for any internships or entry-level positions that are open in states that have wolf work. Oregon typically has a wolf intern during the summer. I haven't heard if we're going to get one for sure yet or not this year. So yeah, take an internship. There are opportunities sometimes to get out there and do some volunteer work with either ODFW or other state agencies that are looking for folks to help with cameras or track surveys, stuff like that. Definitely a contentious topic. That would be my other advice, that wolves are a contentious topic, and there's people that very much support wolves on the landscape, and there are people that very much don't support wolves on the landscape. Do some research on wolves and their ecology and some of the issues surrounding wolves. And yeah, I would encourage anyone who's interested in researching wolves to pursue it. I mean, they're fascinating creatures.
You talked about having kids at a young age and working throughout that. A lot of people think that this career is unfavorable towards moms. How did you balance that? And the reason why it's unfavorable is because, like you mentioned, there's field work and stuff. It's not that people are anti-mom, it's that the nature of the job sometimes can be conflicting with taking care of kids at home. So, how did you navigate that? Or do you have any advice for people who have children and they want to pursue a career like this?
Yeah, I love that. I love that we're going to have this conversation because I do think that women, moms specifically, are so quick to just set themselves to the side and not pursue those dreams, just assume that there may be limitations. I feel so fortunate that I work for an agency who is very much supportive of family, and they understand that your schedule may be wonky or you have to be flexible in some of those ways. Building that internal network, I think, is really important. I am very fortunate that I have a solid staff. A lot of us are really close. We work together or we're friends outside of the office. And knowing that you always have someone there to support you, whether it be like, hey, I can't go out and do this field day, or I can't go do that survey because I have a baseball game or I don't have a babysitter or whatever. It's just reaching out to your fellow coworkers to see if someone can back you up. I'm married and I'm fortunate that I have a super supportive spouse who understands field work. He understands and has just kind of grown up across our marriage of knowing what it means to be a biologist. But we also have women who are single moms who rely very heavily on their support system, and they recognize that they love their careers and they're willing to kind of go above and beyond, but also find that balance for being a mom and to be a field biologist. I've picked up other coworkers' kids from after school care because they were coming back and they weren't going to make it to kid pickup in time. I think it's just knowing that it takes a village. You're going to be leaning on your community to get them to understand that you don't have a typical 9 to 5 job or 8 to 5 job that's going to have you within 5 minutes of your children. Sometimes you're 5 hours away from your kids. So if you want to be a biologist, just lean heavy on your friends, family. I think so many of us just understand and are so passionate about our jobs as biologists, and a lot of folks in the natural resources realm, we wouldn't hesitate to be there for someone. So my biggest thing would be, if I could do it, and I have 4 kids and I've been pregnant through school, and you just make it happen. I even have it written on my planner, work hard and make it happen.
I am amazed. I don't think I could do that. You're very impressive. One of my colleagues, though, in graduate school, she was getting her master's. She didn't have to do field work. We worked in a genetics lab and the samples were sent to her, but she had 2 kids and she was a single mom. And I don't think I appreciated how hard it was for her. Now I have a partner and he has a son. I don't have any kids. So I have some experience parenting, and oh my gosh, it's hard. And he's older too. Like he came into my life when he was 7, so I didn't have any of the tough baby or toddler years. And yeah, I give you and all the other working moms out there so much credit.
It's not for the faint of heart. It's definitely, it's hard. That's a lot of work. But my mom went back to college when I was in high school. I had a great role model growing up of a woman who had a career goal in mind. So my mom was an occupational therapist. That's what she did for as long as I could remember. And when I was in high school, she decided to go back to school for what she really wanted to do, which was to be a nurse. And I watched her apply to school. I watched her work all day long, stay up super late studying. And nursing school is like no joke whatsoever. I mean, she pushed through, she followed through, and she retired as an RN. And I think my kids have seen me do the same thing of having a goal in mind. My dad told me, you're going to spend more time at work than you are going to spend at home with your family. So you better love what you do. And I absolutely love what I do. And I'm willing to go the extra mile. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, it's hard. There are definitely things that I miss. I don't get to be there for every single thing for my kids, like every field trip. I don't get to volunteer as often as I would like. I don't get to make it to every baseball game. My daughter's over at college right now. I don't get to go to every event, but they do see that I'm working hard and I'm doing it because it's something that I really want to do. And it's also for the benefit of their future. We as humans can do hard things. It's just a matter of believing in yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, changing topics a little bit. This is a fun question. So, you've done a lot of stuff in your career. What would you say is like the craziest or strangest thing you've done for the job?
Oh gosh.
We already got fish in a bag and getting an arrow out of a deer. What
Yeah, yeah. What else? Our disease sampling is always very interesting. So,
disease?
disease sampling,
Okay.
yeah. So, taking fecal samples out of a bighorn sheep, we're not picking up fecal samples off the ground. We are physically manipulating those samples out of the sheep into a glove.
I'll let you use your
Never,
imagination, everyone out there.
I never thought I'd be doing anything like that. Wrestling deer. So typically we would use drugs, chemical mobilization drugs, to get an animal who's hung up in
Mhm.
something to be asleep so that we can handle them. But sometimes it's an emergency situation, and the best thing to do is tackle it. I never thought that I would be tackling a deer
An
that's hung
adult
up in,
deer?
yeah, yeah, with
Wow.
antlers,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, definitely that, darting in weird situations. I've had to dart a buck that was wrapped up in netting at a driving range on a golf course with a whole row of people that are taking videos that I'm sure are out there somewhere on the internet.
It's like I'm not
Weird
a
things.
bad parallel parker, but if somebody's behind me, I get so nervous. I feel like maybe that's a similar situation.
That is definitely a similar situation. Yeah. It's, any of that hands-on wildlife work. I've driven around with goslings in my truck looking for a pseudo mom to stick them with before because somebody picked them up. And so there I am driving my work truck with goslings in my lap,
Oh, that's
looking for
fun.
some mom to take them. So it's certainly a lot of impromptu strange things. Definitely a lot of necropsies and seeing just crazy things come out of
Mhm.
animals that you just didn't expect to see.
Okay, and last question. You mentioned you loved mentoring, and anyone out there should definitely follow you on LinkedIn. I'll post the link in the show notes. You give great advice on LinkedIn. Why do you love mentoring so much?
I think one of the reasons I love to mentor so much is, for one, I see myself in a lot of these young
Hmm.
folks who have just so much passion to go and do something that they really want to do. We, as wildlife biologists, don't make very much money, but we are out there
Hmm.
because we love the natural resources, we love the outdoors, or we love wildlife. We're out there being passionate about something. And I think it takes a little more encouragement to keep folks on that pathway of following their dreams rather than following the dollar bills.
Hmm.
And sometimes it just takes a little more encouragement. I've had some really incredible mentors in my life, and I just want to pay it forward. I've had great professors. I've had so many amazing people that I've worked with that are now retired. I really just want to pass it on because you see so many folks in the wildlife field that start in that direction and hit a roadblock and then quit. And
Hmm.
they had so much potential. I don't like to see that. I want to see them pursue their dreams because there's a lot of options out there. Being a wildlife biologist for a federal agency, it looks a lot different than a state, than a nonprofit
Hmm.
organization or a private entity. If you want to be a wildlife biologist, there probably is a good fit for you out there. We need more mentors in the world that can help the next generation figure out exactly where it is that they fit in the puzzle.
I agree with that so much. And not only do we not get paid that much, but it's also really competitive on top of that. And I think, honestly, I don't have any data on this, but I think it's hard to find good mentors. I think a lot of people out there in supervisor positions are not very encouraging. And some work environments can also be really discouraging. I talked to somebody yesterday who they worked in places where they were constantly overworked and underpaid. And she was burnt out on this field and she took some time off from it. I told her I really never worked more than 40 hours for the most part for my jobs, honestly. Some weeks went more, but I never went crazy working all the time and we weren't expected to. And she was just like, her jaw dropped. When I worked at the museum, we worked 9 to 5 jobs. And I'm sure like you, the hours might be wonky sometimes, but there's jobs out there like that. So it's easy for people to get burned by a couple of toxic positions. And yeah, they're great people and they had so much potential, but then they don't pursue it because of that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that we definitely do need more mentors out there. I think that's across the board. We really do need to see more people positively supporting others, just keeping that momentum in a good direction. And like I said, I feel really fortunate to work for this agency because it's very much encouraged to be a good mentor and provide that constructive feedback and that positive encouragement to continue to like push yourself to be that person that you want to be, or like in my position, guiding my staff to where it is that they want to be long term and knowing kind of the routes that it takes to get there. It doesn't take very much of my time to be a mentor. I'm so excited to be on this podcast today because it really is such a big and important part of my life. I've taught as a guest speaker up at Central Oregon Community College and at OSU Cascades. That is just like one tiny little blip of getting people started on networking that can really take them a long ways to, kind of bring them out of their shell and see that there's just a whole world out there with so much potential.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for doing this podcast. It was such a joy to talk to you. I'll definitely be following your adventures on LinkedIn, and I'm excited to see where you go in the future. And anyone who has you as a mentor is super lucky.
Oh, thank you so much. And you're just the fanciest scientist that I've ever met.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for your advice. Before we go, I want to reiterate a couple of points. First, if you found Jamie's advice helpful, please share it because as we talked about at the end, finding good mentors can be difficult and they are out there. So if you found any of her tips helpful, share it. Somebody might be willing to give up on their career, and if they just had one more ounce of advice, somebody who's just willing to believe in them, perhaps they would be here doing great work towards conservation and wildlife. Next, I want to say something kind of controversial. I don't think Jamie is lucky. She calls herself lucky throughout the interview, but I am not buying it because she set herself up for those opportunities. I think that her hard work in putting herself out there by networking, doing all the right things, opportunities naturally present themselves, and she was there to take them on. There's a famous quote by the Roman philosopher Seneca that says, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." I truly don't believe she was lucky. I think that she set herself up for these amazing opportunities. So make sure that you are doing the same. I have several podcast episodes on networking. I will link them in the show notes. And if you're on YouTube, your next video is going to start playing for you. You're going to get my best tips for networking, and you'll find out that the biggest mistake that people make is that they don't network. So make sure you are doing it. So if you want a career in wildlife, set yourself up for similar situations. Make sure you're on my email list, especially for the Becoming a Wildlife Professional free training series, which I run every couple of months. That is an excellent way to prepare yourself for wildlife careers. Thank you so much for being here, and I'd love to hear what you think about the show. What did you think about Jamie's experiences? Did she flip your perception on what it's like to be a wildlife biologist, especially as a mom? I'd love to hear your feedback. Please share this episode, and also please rate and review my podcast. That helps other people find it. Thanks, guys, and have an amazing day. Be kind to wildlife, be kind to others, be kind to animals. I am signing off.